dignitaries on the dais, and all the research scholars and the students of the masters or graduation who are going to make various presentations in this seminar. Future of looking at the research. And very quickly coming to the point that how do we look at what may be the possible futures of research so far as humanities and literature is concerned. Obviously, as our plenary has told us, that multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and even transdisciplinary kind of things is going to be a kind of buzzwords around this century. But apart from that, what other things can be seen or visualized? Those who are PhD scholars sitting here, for you might already have decided on your topic, and so maybe the ideas as such may not be directly useful to those who are already on the path of research. But we look at a possibility that you all also will be research supervisors in future, and then maybe your students or somebody will be looking towards you to give some ideas that how we can move on. So the time where we are standing, the juncture where we are standing, from there we try to look at what may be the possibilities in coming 5 or 10 years. We can't say what will be after 20, 25 years. But something that coming 5, 10 years, the world is moving so fast that we can, it is nearly impossible to predict after a decade what kind of scenario will be there. So how do I try to look at that what may be the possible chances of doing research in humanities and specifically literature is concerned in the coming years? The first very important thing that comes in the mind obviously is about epidemic, and we know that we can't escape the influence of epidemic. What are the questions? The first thing that we see is that wherever we refer to documents on epidemiology or literature review on epidemiology, before this corona, we have seen that most of those documents which were coming from WHO, World Health Organizations, and most of the developed countries also, they used to predict that this kind of pandemic is possible. People were predicting that anytime the world may face a pandemic. But their worry was the third world countries. Their worry was the developing countries. It was not the first world. They were always worried what will happen to Asia, South Asia, India, African countries, poor countries, what will happen to them. Now what we have seen is that the most damage or the number of deaths has been in the first world rather than the third world. So all those predictions which were going in those documents has to a greater extent gone wrong, and that requires a kind of a new way of looking. The way we were looking previously towards this entire thing requires a change into that, and that is where something is very significant. When it comes to literature, the historiography of literature, for example, when we look at modernist literature, because we are celebrating 100th year of 1922 year, and 1922 had been a kind of a magical year for modernity in European circles, and then it spread across the world also. 1922 was the year where lots of those works like the Westland and other things were published. Ulysses, Virginia Woolf, and most of those modernists who influenced the scene on the global literature, they were all working around and publishing the books in 1922. So during those years, and we all have studied, like literature students might have studied about the history of 20th century, and we know that we concentrated a lot on world wars, First World War and Second World War. And time and again we came to the conclusion that it is the First World War which led to modernity, or then the Second World War which led to post-modernity in different ways. But rarely people thought about Spanish flu, 1918, which killed more number of people, almost people say there were 9 million people died in the war, First World War. 50 million died in the Spanish flu, and the entire world was affected. But historiography has rarely taken note of Spanish flu, or not even the literature also. Elizabeth Autka has come up with a very interesting book, Viral Modernism, and is trying to read the Westland, the Second Coming, with the reference of Spanish flu. So this opens another dynamics that our countries also might have faced the similar kind of pandemic in the past, how the literature has responded, or why have we missed out? What is that the way we remember wars, we don't remember disease. Even if there are so many deaths with disease, why don't we remember? What's problem with cultural memory? That the way cultural memories record deaths and keep on telling Mahakavyas and great stories about war, they rarely talk about epidemics or pandemics, which also kill large number of people. So that can be a very interesting concern to look into. Second important topic that we can look here is about digital culture. We live in 21st century, which obviously people have told about digital things. So how digital culture is shaping our life, our thoughts, our philosophies, our whatever we do now, obviously is undergoing tremendous change. So what questions can be raised around digital cultures and digital humanities? That becomes very, very important point to be seen here. So what we can see here in digital humanities is that it's not on, we now are going towards a distinction between what is creative literature and what is generative literature. So now the question that can machines write poem is an outdated question. Algorithms are developing and machines are writing literatures as such. But the concern will be, someday people will say that I am doing a research on a poet who is a robot. So those days also may come that people might be investigating poetry written by robots or computers, and that also. So generative literature, machines generate literature, humans create literature. So again, a distinction is emerging into this realm that requires some questions. We need to look at the poetics also. In feminist discourse, we are trying to see that Elaine Sholter would say that women should go towards their own poetics instead of the Aristotle's poetics, a patriarchal poetics. Now, well, people would say we should go towards the poetics of the robots also. So that's how it can lead to a different direction also. Apart from this, when we think of language, machines are learning our languages very fast. So NLP, natural language processing, is done quite quickly by machines. And so we all have seen how OK Google works on our Android phone, or Siri works on mobile Apple phone, or Alexa kind of a thing. So they are now understanding lots of variants of languages. They are able to understand, they are able to process, and they are also able to respond. So how the students who are dealing with linguistics and language teaching or learning will have to again look at NLP also. So along with that, the another third important concern that we are facing is about climate change. And in climate change, how are we going to look at literature and its representation also? Amitav Ghosh has written a very interesting book about derangement, the Great Derangement, the full title of the book, where he questioned that literature, like epidemic, has again failed somewhere to answer properly the question of climate change. Or climate change has not been a kind of a concern for novelists, specifically coming to that question. And then he obviously says that how can a novel be written with a concern about climate change? Maybe to answer the questions he raised in the Great Derangement, he wrote one novel, which is the last novel that he published, is The Gun Island. And it seems to be a kind of an answer to his question that how a novelist can deal with the idea of climate change. So that novel, Gun Island, what is Gun Island doing? So one thing, you go back into your myth. The myths of the Aboriginal people, they have recorded beautifully their connection with nature. Even the change in the nature and the life of the human beings are quite interestingly recorded in the myth. So one thing, you have to go back to the myth, you have to reread the myths, reinterpret, and then have to say in the context of contemporary times also. You have to see all those sites which are being troubled by some kind of climate changes. It is happening in nooks and corners on the earth. And it is not that it is again the third world and not the first world. So in Gun Island, Amitav Ghosh is giving a setting of Sundarbans, that is in Bengal, Bangladesh and India, and then Venice also. So there is a European city, Venice, which also is getting submerged. And not only that, he takes us to America also and says that here are wildfires. We might think that wildfires and natural calamities cannot be answered properly by third world countries. But well, even the first world countries are battling with the climate change and they're not able to find a proper solution. That needs to be highlighted, that so far as climate is concerned, the earth is concerned, we all are connected. But how those literatures can be approached is what he is trying to answer there. I think we may have many other ideas coming from here also. Let me end my brief talk here with this, some of the ideas that how I try to look at the future of humanities and literature also. Thank you everybody. Thank you.